Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me. It's Friday morning over here, nice and early in Australia. Not sure what time zone it is for you, but thank you for joining me anyway. So today we've got two essential topics for every brand, and that is stability testing and how to find your product position. Now, we'll jump straight into stability testing in a minute. What I would ask is definitely we're taking questions live, but I do have a little bit of an overview to give you first, so I may actually answer some of your questions while I'm going through that, and then I will call for questions, and then please post away and I'll get as many of those answered for you as possible. So before I start, I do want to also let you know we have a fantastic totally free masterclass you can access from our workshop page or from our free video page of our website, personalcarescience.com.au. Now in this masterclass we have 15 lectures, we have over 6 hours of free video content, we have a 50-page booklet that comes with it, and you learn how to make 3 products, 2 of them organic, an organic cream and an organic shampoo. And we also talk you through the fundamentals of getting started with your formulation. So it's our Cosmetic Formulations Fundamentals Masterclass, and I put it together because there's so much misinformation out there, and that's also why I'm running these lives. I wanted to help make sure I get you started right. Of course, you can learn more with us professionally later. We have our full diploma courses, which are industry recognised and internationally recognised by the IFSCC. They are full diploma courses, and they will give you the qualification of a cosmetic chemist. So let's get started. Stability testing. One of the first things I really want to make sure you are aware of, and a lot of viewers out there may not be aware of this, is that every company is supposed to hold stability results, and that might have shocked a few of you already. Now in the EU and UK, for example, they have very explicit rules in their regulations that definitely specify this and actually have several criteria around the stability testing, and I'll have a look at those briefly in a moment. But I just want to point out, for countries where they don't explicitly state it in their regulations, it's still a requirement. It is a company's responsibility, whether they're selling toys or t-shirts or anything. The company putting a product, any product, onto the market is responsible to make sure that that product is safe and suitable for consumer use throughout the entire shelf life or time that it's available. Now in the case of personal care, this is 2 or 3 years after the person's bought the product. So even if they don't explicitly state it in their regulations, it is inherent. It is an inherent responsibility that every brand is responsible for the products they put onto the market. So how can you know that your product is safe and stable and suitable for use and even performs the way you're promising for 2 or 3 years if you haven't done your stability testing? Which means if something goes wrong with the product once it's out in the market and you face a product recall, for example, a lot of insurance companies won't insure bad judgment, which means if you haven't conducted stability testing, they often won't insure you for that event. So every brand putting a personal care product onto the market, every brand putting anything onto the market, is responsible to make sure it's safe and suitable for use. Now, for a cosmetic brand, this means making sure that you have data to support the shelf life of your product. There's 3 key parameters that you want to be checking for. That is the stability, that is the suitability for the consumer use, and performance. So we're going to have a look at a couple of parameters. Now that I've got that out the way, it is so important, like I say, that you're aware of this. If you're going to have a product, this is something you need to make sure you do for your brand. It's protection for your brand, and it's also going to protect you against the chance of a recall later. So let's have a look at some of those key aspects. The first is, so another thing that's really important that you need to know too is that product will change over time. It absolutely will. 500% guarantee you your product will change from the date it's manufactured right through to 3 years later. Even if you've got something that's, you know, susceptible to the least amount of change, like a powdered mineral foundation, for example, there will be changes to that formula. Now, of course, in the case of any water-based products, your foaming products, definitely your emulsions, there can be quite significant changes over that time. And it's the extent to which these changes occur that will make the changes either acceptable or not acceptable. So one of the first things is consumer acceptance. Does the product maintain its appearance, its feel? Does it keep the right odor? Does it change in color? Does it change its viscosity such that it doesn't suit its packaging anymore? That's another really important consideration. Or does it change its viscosity such that application by a consumer is no good anymore? Some obvious examples, if I had a product that was packed in a tube, for example, and a year later it loses its viscosity and it just runs out the tube, that's obviously unacceptable. What about if I had a product that, say, was a shampoo, and when you're first using it, pumps out into the hand nicely and I can apply it to my hair, and a year later suddenly it's dropped its viscosity such that it just runs out of my hand. I can't even get it to my hair before it's just falling out of my hand. Or conversely, what if you had a cream or a lotion that was meant to be pumped out of a container, and 6 or 12 months later it's turned so viscous that it actually blocks the pump? These are all unacceptable consumer changes. So this is why we do stability testing. Now, can you look at a formula and be sure about what it's going to do over time? No, you absolutely cannot. Sometimes even the best science, when you do the practical testing, just for whatever reason, it does something unexpected. There's definitely certain assurances you can have from a good formulation, absolutely, but it's never a guarantee. So first of all, that's the consumer issues. Quality perspective. Now, again, a lot of people, when they think stability, they instantly think about contamination and microorganism growth. And that's only just one aspect of stability. What we're really talking about, and what's a bigger issue with stability, is when we have some product separation or some obvious appearance or odor changes. So quality isn't just if there's microorganism growth. And if you missed my live from the other day, I went over some key issues with preservative selection. So that live stream is available on YouTube, and I talk about different preservatives, and we even talked a bit about preservative efficacy testing there. So with your stability testing, it's not just about checking for microbial growth. It actually is a lot to do with looking at how that product form changes over time. And one of the things we monitor a lot and very carefully are things like your viscosity and your pH. Anyone that ever studies with us will know I do go on a lot about monitoring that pH and making sure you pick compatible ingredients, compatible with the pH of the product and the pH needs of other ingredients. And that is one thing, that is definitely one marker that is easy to monitor, even for small brands, is to monitor how that pH might move over time. And that alone can have impact on your other actives, your preservatives, and your viscosity. Changes in pH can have a massive difference to viscosity. Changes in pH can also cause massive problems with your stability and separation of products. So again, these are more of the quality parameters. And then, of course, we've got the safety perspective, and you've also got the performance perspective. So if your product changes its pH a lot, you'll find that some of your actives or preservatives may no longer be effective. And of course, there goes your performance. The safety issues, if the pH becomes extreme or if the preservative is no longer effective, then of course you can get microbial contamination, which is then a big safety risk. So these are some of the things you need to think about. It's not just about, oh, the product looks okay after 6 or 12 months and just keep selling it, because you could end up, and you can get changes after time that can be quite dramatic quite quickly. So what do? So in an ideal world, you would make your product and you would monitor it over real-time conditions for 2 or 3 years, and then you'd sell it. Now that's obviously commercially totally impractical. No one can do that. No company can do that. So what we do is something called accelerated stability testing. Now, very, very important. Again, if you're new to this topic, please write this down, because again, the top thing you should have there is my company's responsibility. It is totally your responsibility to make sure you've got a stability protocol underway. The other thing that's important is you need an accelerated stability testing schedule as well as your real-time stability testing schedule. Now, we'll talk about EU a little. In the EU, you need to have stability data that shows your product is stable for at least 30 months. Otherwise, it must carry an expiry date. Then if it is stable over 30 months, you can use your period after opening symbol. Now, I'll come back to these concepts, but what I want to do is talk about that 30-month sort of point. And again, if you're in another country, I would recommend, again, where it's not explicitly stated, because the EU guidelines are so well stated, they are great to follow. They give some really great guidance that we should use all over the world, even if you're not under their regulations. So basically, when you're doing your accelerated testing, you can do your accelerated testing for around half of this time, but you should have real-time stability testing undergoing that whole way to achieve the full 30 months. And again, we're just going to say 30 months is the marker. You could go to 36 months. That's 3 years if you want. But again, we're using 30 months as our absolute minimum cutoff point. So if you're planning your stability data, you do need to have both accelerated and real time. Now, you have your accelerated so you can get to market sooner. How soon? Well, it depends a bit on the formula. And I do want to just introduce you to this concept of fast formulation techniques. Now, I have a couple of videos on my YouTube channel about fast formulation. Fast formulation, now your big guys do this, like so your L'Oreals do this, and this is how they get to market really fast with product innovation. So I've got a fast formulations on creams, I've got a fast formulations on surfactants, and I have a fast formulations with a workhorse active. And this is a very clever technique that your big companies use so they can get to market really fast with a new innovation. And what they basically do is they create these really stable base products that will handle all sorts of extras being added. So, they use a lot of non-ionic materials. They use very broad spectrum, large pH range preservatives, and then they've got these really stable, aesthetically pleasing bases. They can change a little bit of the oils or emollients to suit the latest trends. They can put actives in. But what they have done, and what's really important that you remember with these fast formulation bases, and definitely in my videos I explain the concept more, that they have done robust, huge amounts of stability testing on the fast formulation bases that they're using. So it's not like getting a 10 kilo pail of cream from your local supplier and then adding a few actives and then going to market with it. That is not what it is. What it is they've made their own formulas and they've done a lot of robust testing with very adverse ingredients that would cause failures to find out that, hey, this base is really, really stable. And then they can mix and choose and add different actives to that base and know that it's with a high degree of confidence that it's going to be stable. Now, another thing I want to point out about accelerated stability is that it's not a guarantee. It is only ever a solid, confident prediction. Okay, so one of the things that you get with accelerated stability testing is you'll get your results in obviously earlier. You can potentially go to market earlier, but they're not a guarantee. So you could have a product pass 3 months of accelerated testing and think, yay, I'm going to go to market now. I'm going to get my big bulk production made and I can go to market and I'm going to have, 2 years real time. That's actually, you can't predict 2 years from 3 months, by the way, just to let you know. And that's some of the misinformation I see out there. But the point is, when you actually put your product out in the market, unless you have that longer real-term result, you can't be sure that your accelerated results are going to perform the same way as your real-time results. So there can be some differences that mean you get these false positives or false negatives. But what accelerated testing does, it means you can get to market faster without having to wait 2 or 3 years. So if you're saying to me, okay, Belinda, how long should we wait? Well, again, we have another great video about timing and how long it takes with development, how chemists puts together a formula, how time goes in that process. And as part of that, we recommend that you do a pilot batch. So you have your initial development period, and that will be typically 3 months. And then from there, you can then create a pilot batch of product, which is a small batch. And then you can start putting that pilot batch through accelerated testing and real time. You can start your real time and accelerated on that pilot batch. And you can also have, usually from a pilot batch, you'll have enough product that you can also run some larger evaluations with consumers or get some more meaningful test results that you can use in your marketing. And we really recommend this when you're going to have a more professional brand, because you're starting to get some good results from larger lab scale equipment. That's your pilot batch, or even some small manufacturing equipment at that point. By the time you get to your pilot batch, you would have also had a large lab batch done before that point. So before you actually get to your full scale production, you would probably have 6 months accelerated data behind you from your large lab batch and your pilot batch. And that is the best industry recommendation to prevent major issues. And the other thing is, if you did have 6 months accelerated testing behind you, if you then make your bulk batch and then you suddenly do your next round of stability testing at 9 months and you go, oh, it's starting to fail, it's no longer any good, you would have time to sell that full scale batch knowing that that product is probably going to fail around the 18-month point. So you could move as much product as possible knowing it's going to be a really good quality up to around the 12 or 15-month point, for example. And in the meantime, you can be reformulating and improving on those issues. So it's not just about knowing that something goes wrong with the stability, it's also about being able to identify what has gone wrong and then fix it in time so that your commercial batches aren't impacted or that your sales aren't impacted either. And definitely you want to avoid that product recall. So that was a pretty big overview of stability, why you need to do it, what can go wrong, and even with the best science behind it, there can still be issues. As well as I've introduced you to the concept of fast formulations. Please watch those videos. They're totally free. They're on YouTube. And that's how the big guys get to market so fast. My big message here for the smaller brands is just because you see large brands launch fast doesn't mean they've skimped. They have not skimped. I can guarantee you they have not skimped on any of these stability tests. They're using their fast formulation bases that they've already done robust, and I'm talking really robust testing on, under all sorts of adverse conditions. So again, it's not just getting some bulk base from your local supplier, adding a few extracts and essential oils and then selling it. That is not what a fast formulation base is. It's about making that base specific to your company, your brand, doing robust testing on it first, and that in itself can take several months or a year or more under all sorts of varying conditions. And then you know, hey, I've got this base product that I can now bring innovations to market fast. So again, that's a bit more of an advanced concept, but that is how the big brands get to market so fast with the latest innovations. So a couple of stability tests. Now we do have our certificate in cosmetic quality and stability. If you wanted to just focus on stability testing, and it also covers micro, that certificate in cosmetic quality and stability also has your GMP. So if you're going to be manufacturing, then it also covers off on your GMP techniques, as well as how to do microbial testing for yourself, as well as how to do all of your stability testing for yourself. So you actually learn that with us. You can do it yourself. You don't have to outsource it. And of course, the quality and stability is so important. It's a part of all of our advanced diplomas and our advanced certificates and diplomas. So our certificate in advanced cosmetic science, certificate in advanced hair formulations, and diploma of personal care formulation all contain what's in that certificate in quality and stability. So you can do it on its own, or it is part of our bigger courses. If you're a brand putting product onto the market, then you should learn how to do this stability. Now, often your manufacturers might be able to run the stability for you, but it is still your responsibility. I get asked by companies, oh, but I've had my formula made by a chemist and I've had it contract manufactured. So isn't it their responsibility? Ultimately, it is the brand's responsibility putting the product onto the market. It's your responsibility. You've put the product onto the market. If something goes wrong, whose fault is it? Well, if you didn't do stability testing, it is your fault. And I cannot say that any clearer if I try. And that's exactly how an insurer would look at it. So you need to do this stability testing. The most economical way is to learn to do it yourself, or be prepared to outsource it. But in any case, learn and understand what's involved so that you can interpret results properly and take the appropriate action. So we use accelerated temperatures. We use a centrifuge if we have access to one. A lot of small brands, you don't need a centrifuge. It just gives you answers in 15 minutes instead of 2 weeks. We use freeze-thaw testing. Freeze-thaw testing is really reliable, especially for emulsions, and it also checks for separation of all products really well. And this is basically where you put it in a freezer one day and you take it out and let it thaw the next day, and you put it in the freezer the next day, and then you take it out the freezer the next day. And you keep doing this for 5 or 6 cycles, and that also gives you a good idea of how robust that formula is against any sort of separation or other changes. We also test against new batches of product, as well as how it ages, and these things we test for, like appearance or aroma. Of course, microbial testing is done along the way, and preservative efficacy testing is done at the start and at the end. Now, again, I get a lot of questions about preservative efficacy testing, so let me be really clear with you. Preservative efficacy testing is not the same as microbial testing. Microbial testing brands can do for themselves. Preservative efficacy testing must be outsourced to a proper lab. They introduce a lot of bad bacteria into the product, bad fungus, things you don't want in your lab ever. But they have the special rooms and techniques to make sure that they don't contaminate their own workspace. Please do not do your own PET, ever. I don't do it. You shouldn't do it. So that's how a lot of the tests are run. Then the time points. The time points will depend on what type of product you have. There is no one stability protocol that's going to suit every type of product. So again, part of learning the stability testing is to identify what time points you need to test. And again, that varies for the different formulas and different product types. So now let's just briefly cover off. I know I get questions about period after opening. Again, I want to really emphasize, if you're in EU or UK, please write write this down because I get asked the same question over and over. So please write it down so it's really, really clear for you. Period after opening can only be used after you have stability data that shows your product is stable for at least 30 months. So you can't just put period after opening on your product. You have to have stability data that shows that it's stable for at least 30 months first before you can use the PAO. Then your PAO would be based on you opening that product and then running tests the fact that it's been opened. And then you can determine your period after opening. So again, please, I hope that's clear. I get asked so many questions about that. Remember, you need to have 30 months of stability results first. And these can be from accelerated, but again, remember, you must also have real time underway. So can you go to market at the 6-month point with accelerated stability testing done and passed? And of course, you'd only have 6 months real time as well. Yes, you can, but you must continue both your accelerated and real time tests to achieve that 30 months for your accelerated. So that can cut off around the 15-month point because that's approximately your example of what it would be at 30 months. But your real time must continue right through to that 30 months if you don't want to wear an expiry date in the EU and UK. Now, in other countries, you don't necessarily need an expiry date. There are some expiry date requirements in Australia, for example, with products claiming SPF even as a cosmetic. Other than that, other countries don't normally require. ASEAN will follow EU rules, so please make sure if you're an ASEAN region, you follow the EU, UK rules as well. So now let's open up to some questions. Does having a high plant oil content, 15 to 20%, detrimental to stability over using esters and silicons? You'll need to use a good antioxidant, and you will need to make sure that you do stability testing to check that the antioxidant is sufficient protection. I have a great video, again, free. It's on using vitamin E in cosmetics. Now, let me be clear again, tocopherol acetate does not protect your formula. So don't use the acetate form as an antioxidant. While it's an antioxidant for the skin, it is not an antioxidant for your formula. So tocopherol is a great one. There's also a very resinous rosemary extract, but it obviously has an aroma, so you may or may not want to use that. But definitely that video where I show you with the vitamin E, I actually do several serial trials with different amounts of vitamin E with a cream, 15% rosehip oil, which is a very oxidizable oil. In other words, I was using a very challenging formula, and I used different inputs of vitamin E to show the most effective amount of vitamin E for that formula. And I want to emphasize that was for that formula specifically. So if you've got a product where it's got a really high oil content, plant oil content, you do need preservative. You also need to consider, are you using hot fill? Like, does it become a balm and that has to be poured off hot? You'll need more antioxidant because some of the antioxidant will be used up protecting the formula while it's being poured off. Or if it's cold pour, you may not need as much. But how to use stability test? Again, you'd use some accelerated temperatures and real-time testing, and you'd watch for things like odor or color changes. And again, it may be that you have to do a few different versions and do accelerated testing on them to find out the best vitamin E input to protect that specific formula. So there's no golden rule on vitamin E. There's a lot of misinformation about the use of vitamin E out there on the internet. So the only way you can be sure is to run the stability testing with some serial dilutions of your vitamin E, like I did in that video. And then you'll be able to know for sure for your exact formula. And again, it's about being specific to your formula's needs. And again, also the concentration and type of vitamin E that you would be using. So how would you do stability testing on waterless product like shampoo bars and deodorant, etc.? The same as liquids like exposed to heat, etc. Look, it does depend a bit too on what active you've used. So definitely one of the things we'd check with bars or sticks, well, bars in particular, bars and sticks are actually formulated differently. So like a shampoo bar is very different to a deodorant stick. So the stability testing I'd run, again, I'd have to look at, for instance, with the deodorant one active, because that could impact what tests I run. I would definitely check with a bar. We check for cracking over time. So we don't want it in a humid incubator. We want it in quite a dry incubator. We want to check if it's going to crack. You would do accelerated temperatures, but just remember, sometimes when you expose these types of products, bars or sticks in particular, to high temperatures, you'll get changes that would never happen at real time. So you have to be a little careful about interpreting your results, because they're a bar or a stick. So if you expose them to heat, what are they going to do? They're going to start to melt. Are they going to do that at 20 or 25 degrees? No, they're never going to do that. So again, when you're running these sorts of tests, just keep in mind the conditions that you use. You could use 40 degrees, but you would also need to interpret the results carefully. Are the changes happening from that long exposure to heat that would never happen at 20 or 25 degrees? This is why you need to do accelerated in real time, so that you can monitor the changes and see what's happening in real time versus what happened in your accelerated tests, to see what impact temperature had, or if that would happen in the real world. So again, they're the key tests that I would run. But again, bear in mind you may get changes. And same thing too with balms and oxidation. That's another important point, that some of those high temperature changes may never happen at real time. How much we can trust or interpret the pH changes in accelerated stability testing. With all of your accelerated stability testing, this is why you need to run real time as well. So when you're running your accelerated, you're actually looking, and you should be graphing and monitoring changes or results over time. And then you would get your real time. And again, this is what we teach. So, you know, when you're looking at stability testing, I would really recommend, if nothing else, you do the study only version. It's half the price of our full certificate. Do the study only version of that certificate in cosmetic quality and stability, and you'll learn all of this. But basically what we do is we graph all of the changes or results over time, and then we compare how they're looking at the different time points and see how they correlate. And then we can see how confident we can be in that accelerated testing compared to the real-time results. So we can see, well, are the real-time results following the same trends and path as my accelerated results? Because if I'm not seeing the same sort of changes in my real-time results that I am in my accelerated, then it could be the extreme conditions that I'm putting my product through in the accelerated stability tests that's actually causing the changes to my product, rather than it being changes that would happen in real time. So yeah, it's how much can we trust those results? We need to use the results from both accelerated and real time to determine how much we can trust the results in general, not just with pH. So I hope that that's really helped you there. That's how we do it. What is the science behind sunlight affecting viscosity? I put a formulation into stability, and when exposed to prolonged sunlight, it experienced a loss in viscosity where the other samples did not. Actually, this is a really interesting point, and I also want to talk about light boxes. So we use light boxes sometimes if we want to see what effect sunlight, lights from a room will have on a product. And these can be really unpredictable, because you really don't normally store a product that way. And you might find that you have changes under a light box condition that would never happen in real-time conditions. So with this specific example, without knowing anything more about it, I want to see, okay, so this is another important point. We wouldn't just take one result on its own. If something like this happened under an accelerated condition, we'd actually look at what other changes, was there other changes to pH? Was there other changes to odor, or other changes to the visual appearance of the product, not just that it went running? And what else happened when it was, say, under accelerated temperatures? What else happened when it was under freeze-thaw? Did any of those other situations cause the same change to the product? If it was purely just viscosity changes because it was sitting in a windowsill exposed to light, then I'd suggest it's a false result. But if you had other changes to other parameters of the product, the pH, the appearance, the smell, separation, if you had other changes under other accelerated conditions, freeze-thaw, high temperature, then I'd say it's the formula. So again, without knowing anything else about it, it's really hard for me to say, but I hope that's given you some guidance on what you should check to know whether it's just sitting in a windowsill that's doing it. The other thing is you can also get UV protected packaging, which is quite common to get, and that way it will protect against some oxidative or light induced changes to the product inside. So that's another way of protecting your product if you do have this kind of issue. What RPM and at for how long, and what temperature is used when doing centrifuge to detect stability of emulsions? Is it a reliable test? It is really reliable to see in about 15 minutes, 3000 RPM, room temperature, to see if your emulsion is going to separate. If your emulsion does not separate under those conditions, then you've got a pretty stable emulsion. I would still do freeze-thaw. I love freeze-thaw. It's incredibly reliable for emulsion stability over a long period of time. And I would still run all the other heat accelerated heat tests as well. So again, you don't just do one test and leave it there. You've really got to be robust with your stability testing, because you're using these accelerated results to give you predictions. And again, they're never a guarantee, but the more robust you can be in your testing, the better you can predict that shelf life before you launch your product into market. Remember, it's all about making sure that product is safe, stable, and suitable for your consumer. You don't want a product recall. So if it means just a couple of extra tests to avoid that situation, do the extra tests. Oh, more questions. Hang on. If you do 6 cycles freeze-thaw, how does that translate in terms of stability? 6 cycles of freeze-thaw. If it passes 6 cycles of freeze-thaw and doesn't separate, you can be, again, pretty confident. It's never a guarantee. You can be pretty confident that formula will be stable for 3 years. And we're talking about separation specifically here. You would, of course, check other changes like pH and viscosity, but definitely freeze-thaw is really good to check for separation. And if you get 6 cycles passed, then you've probably got 3 years of stability up your sleeve. Again, never a guarantee. What if centrifuge test failed but freeze-thaw passed? Which is more reliable? Again, you'd have to look at some of your real-time results. You can't just go off of that. I am a very big fan of freeze-thaw. I've mentioned it a few times. If I had centrifuge fail but freeze-thaw passed, I'd need to check other parameters. I really can't give you a definitive answer there. I'd like to see both pass, is the actual answer. Is one a better test than the other? It depends on your formula. It depends what you're dealing with. So yeah, you've got to be robust with this testing. Like I say, if it's just another test to protect you from a recall, then just do the extra test. Can citric acid be considered an acceptable chelating agent to help support product stability? No, not usually. The amount of citric acid that you use to adjust the pH of a formula is generally not sufficient to be a chelating agent in a formula. Normally you need a higher input of the citric acid to provide its true chelating function. Look, there'd be some, but it's not. I've not found it enough on its own to provide a good chelating function in a formula. You need either a phytic acid or a sodium phytate or an EDTA. And again, that's just experience. I have not found citric acid in the small amounts used for pH adjustment to be sufficient to be a chelating agent. In the acidic formula, pH 3.5 to 4, can we use essential oil in this type of formula, and how do we know whether the essential oil is affected by acidic formula? Good question. Let me just say, with essential oils, no blanket rule applies. And you get some essential oils that will be fine in that low pH. You'll get some essential oils that just will not tolerate it. So again, you have to do stability testing. Remember, whenever you use plant oils or essential oils, you do need an antioxidant for the formula. Remember, it's tocopherol that is a antioxidant for a formula. Tocopherol acetate is only an antioxidant for the skin. So again, you'd have to run stability testing to check if it's suitable. How to check the stability check related, what are the tools and equipment needed, what are the systems needed? Okay, for full details, please do at least the study only option of our certificate in cosmetic quality and stability. I'm not saying this just to sell you a course. I'm saying this to give you the answers. I can't give you the answers in a 1 hour YouTube presentation. We have an entire unit on it. So briefly, a viscometer is absolutely ideal, essential. You need a good pH meter. You'll need some incubators. Your incubators don't have to be anything flash. You can set up a good stability testing station without the viscometer. Viscometer is an expensive piece of equipment. You can monitor things like pH, your visuals, freeze-thaw, use your freezer. You can get small incubators that are actually quite economical from lab suppliers. If you were doing this on a really, really tight budget, I'd say you could get by without your viscometer for a little while, because again, it depends on the type of packaging you're using. If that viscosity changes such that it pours out too quick or it gets clogged, it's a pretty obvious indication you don't need a viscometer for that. If it runs out of the hand, if it starts to separate, again, these are things that you can see without the need for a viscometer. Another thing, actually, it's a good time to bring up that a lot of stability parameters or protocols say plus or minus 10% is what you should be aiming for. And definitely that's a good place to start. But sometimes you might have a minus 20% in viscosity, a drop of 20% in viscosity, but it's still okay for your packaging. So is it still okay to sell? Well, is the rest of the product consumer suitable? Does it come out of the packaging okay still? Does it apply still? Would a consumer notice a massive difference? the answer for that with that kind of a change with viscosity is usually no. So can you keep selling it? Yes. Has it caused a problem with the quality? If you've checked that and it hasn't caused an issue with the quality, then yes, keep selling it. Has it caused an issue with the safety? Then if it hasn't caused an issue with the safety, keep selling it. Just because it might be more than plus or minus 10% different, if it's not impacting the performance, the quality, or the safety of that product, or the consumer aesthetics of that product, keep selling it. Adjust your protocol. And again, we talk about this when we train it, because you don't have to throw it out just because the numbers didn't make sense. What you are looking for is to make sure that your preservatives, your actives are still functional, that your product is still together, that your consumer's still going to be happy with that product, that it's going to suit the packaging and the application. So if you've got a slightly bigger difference in viscosity, which again, if you're on a really, really tight budget, you can do without that Viscometer for a little while, because you can visually see, tell, or feel if that change in viscosity is too great for your consumer. Other things like testing your pH, very, very essential. Other things like testing the aroma, the feel, these are all really essential parameters. But with viscosity, if you can measure it, great. If you can't, you're still going to know if it's acceptable or not. And that's the more important determinant. Obviously, with a Viscometer, you can pick up if changes are happening far sooner than you can without one. But is it still acceptable for your consumer? So I would approach it that way. What about color changes in accelerated stability, since some ingredients are temperature sensitive? Again, a very good question. I have mentioned this a few times. You will sometimes get changes in your accelerated conditions that wouldn't happen under real time, which is why you need to run both and then evaluate your results carefully, because again, that may or may not be relevant. And those oxidative changes that bring about the color changes at higher temperatures may cause other changes in your product that then cause, big differences and instability. So again, you really need to take all in consideration with the real-time stability testing as well. How to determine whether we choose to follow USP criteria in PET if you're in Australia and New Zealand. Okay, well, USP PET criteria are less strict than the British Pharmacopoeia. If you had a sunscreen product in Australia, Australian rules for sunscreens are incredibly strict, even if you comply and fit into the cosmetic category. I would recommend you use BP if you have a sunscreen product. For other cosmetic products, you can use USP standards. So it's up to you if you're in Australia, New Zealand. If you're in US, you should be using USP. If you're in EU or UK, you should be using the British Pharmacopoeia. And again, we teach both when you learn with us, so that you can then make your choice for the product and again, where you're selling it. And again, remember, ASEAN countries follow the EU UK, so you would use the British Pharmacopoeia BP as well. I notice large brands don't use high content of oils and butters and creams. Is this because of stability issues, or are they just being cost effective? It's probably a little bit of both. I can't answer for the large brand, but it would probably be a bit of both. Also, your plant oils tend to feel heavier than some of your other more elegant esters. So again, when you're picking esters versus plant oils, it's got a lot to do with the sensory requirements of your consumer and what they're looking for. So it's probably a bit of cost, it's probably a bit of stability, and it's probably also for the consumers. So a few things there. For how long and at what temperature do you set your incubator to test if a product can have 36 months shelf life? Well, again, it depends which countries you're going to be selling into. If we're stability testing in Australia, we set ours slightly higher because we would on average have our climate be around 20-25 degrees. So we usually run our tests 40 degrees, expecting our real time to be around 25 degrees, which alters how long we run it for. If you're in EU, UK, you would generally set your real time as 20 degrees. And again, then 40 degrees is double that. So you can halve your stability testing schedule. What is 3 months of accelerated stability equivalent in real time? It's not equivalent. I've said that so many times today. I've said it's an indication. It's a prediction. It's not a guarantee. So if you had 3 months accelerated stability, you can be relatively confident that is what you would get at 6 months real time. Please remember, it is not a guarantee, so we can't say it's equivalent. There can be changes in accelerated conditions that don't happen in real time. Please remember that. It's very, very important. How to check the stability of perfumes or alcohol-based products. Okay, this is actually a really good point, not just for when your product contains alcohol or other volatile materials for that point, but your packaging in general. You should be running your stability testing in the packaging you're going to be selling the product in so that you can check for things like if it's airtight. So for example, you could have the specific gravity of a product change over time, and that is because you're getting moisture losses because the packaging isn't sealed tight enough. Now this is very relevant when you have, say, a volatile material like a volatile silicon, or you have ethanol present. But if that pack is secure, then you shouldn't have volatility losses. So again, that's a big packaging consideration, and definitely your stability testing when you run specific gravity, you would find that out pretty quick if you're getting moisture losses through the packaging and the lids. We will have to switch to the next topic. So the next topic we're talking about is finding your product position. Now, I don't want to ruin your Friday or Thursday, depending on where you are in the world, but I'm going to ask you a couple of really tough questions now, and I'm doing this for your benefit, okay? I'll get, you know, this is really, I've got to rip the Band-Aid off and be completely honest with you about your small brand, and to do that, I'm going to ask you some really tough questions. The first question is, what is so great about your brand? All right, I want you to write that down. Don't put it in the columns. Keep it to yourself. And then I want to ask you, how are you going to promote your products? Okay, just make these little notes. Now, I'm going to let you know the best brand advice that you could possibly hear from a professional right now, and it's not going to be pleasant. If you have written down that your difference is that you're organic or natural or don't contain sulfates or PEGs or parabens, I want you to cross that out and I want you to start again. Now, if you've written down for how you're going to promote your product, if you've written down, I'm going to post it on social media, I want you to cross that out too, because every other small brand has just written that. Okay, I told you it wasn't going to be pleasant, but I'm doing it for your own good. So you say, okay, Belinda, well, what am I supposed to do? Okay, what we have done, we've done some extensive case studies and we've interviewed several brands, and we have found unanimously that, hey, they may have. Now, again, with EU, UK, you cannot be making the free from story. You cannot be talking, you know, free from phthalates, free from parabens, free from PEG, blah, 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 because the guidelines over in EU, again, very strict on this, are all about, you know, it's misleading and deceptive to a consumer to suggest that an ingredient isn't in the product when it wouldn't be in there anyway, and that's the case with phthalates a lot of the time. Or it isn't correct to suggest to a consumer that approved cosmetic ingredients are not okay or that could possibly cause harm. So this also fringes on, if you've said clean beauty, I want you to cross that out too. These are not big differences, because all of the small brands out there are clutching at these things, which means you're no different to anyone else. Now, if you're not in EU, UK, you may have it as a background story, don't get me wrong. And I know that if you're in another country, like if you're in Asia or if you're in US, that these are really big out there, you know, but it doesn't make you different. If nothing else, and not only is it misleading and it's not truthful to your consumer, but it doesn't make you different. You can't be successful selling a product on what it doesn't contain. You need to focus on what is different about your product in a good way. That, and this is the case studies and the interviews that we've run with brands, that is what makes them successful. Now, some of them did have this, we focus on using the best ingredients, but they don't restrict themselves by saying that all these other ingredients are going to kill you. They use the really good materials. Now, some of them may not use them, but they don't make it their major message. And that's really what I'm trying to get across to you today. If you've written those things down as your point of difference, they're not a point of difference. Everyone else is trying to say it too. And all of those other little brands saying it, they're struggling just like you. Okay, so what I really want you to do is think about what makes your product so different and so special. Now, these case studies and interviews that we do and all of this training we do in our Diploma of Cosmetic Brand Management. But even if you aren't sure about doing that kind of study, please watch. We have a free first lecture from our Build Your Brand Cosmetic Workshop. It's absolutely free. It's on YouTube, and I talk about point of difference there. And again, this is not me saying, don't say it for whatever reason. I don't have a brand. I have no benefit by saying this to you other than trying to help you realize it's not enough. Okay, so again, if you're in US, for example, you might see a lot of companies out there doing this. I'm not saying you can't say it. I'm just saying don't make it your major story, because it's not enough. Have a much stronger, positive message about what your products do. You may mention it in small print somewhere just as a point of parody because everyone else is saying it. But if that's your major story, then it's not different enough. Okay, you're not going to be seen amongst everyone else. Also, now let's talk about social media. Now, am I saying don't use social media? No, I'm not saying don't use social media. I am saying you'll need social media, but you need an effective social media campaign. There is a massive difference between a social media campaign and an effective social media campaign. And I can't emphasize this point enough. I see a lot of small brands getting out there posting pictures of their product and then wondering why they're not getting sales results. Because every other small brand can take a picture of their jar too. And unfortunately, and again, I told you none of this would be pleasant, but I'm doing it for your benefit. If you just post a picture of a jar or a picture of your product, that's not telling me why I want or why I need to use your product. So your messages need to be about the benefits of the product, how it addresses a very specific target market's needs and wants, and then they're going to want your product. Not just jars of product, not just pictures of pretty people, not just, feel-good quotes. Now, you might go, hey, but the big brands do that. The big brands can do that. They just need to remind people that they're there because people already know they exist. Just remember, even if you have the best product in the world, if no one knows about your brand, you won't sell it. You won't be successful. So when you're a new brand and you're starting out, you need to make sure you have that very, very strong point of difference. And I hope I've got my point across there about having that point of difference so different to what everyone else is claiming and saying. And then, of course, you need to have an effective campaign. Now, we have also just launched some social media workshops. And these social media workshops you can purchase online from our workshops tab on our personal care science page. And these social media workshops have been designed specifically for cosmetic brands. They tell you how to prepare your entire social media strategy, even if that's all you have. But the worst thing is when small brands think, but I'm doing social media and it's not working. I'm going to tell you, if you're doing social media and it's not working, your social media is not good enough. Okay, you can build a brand very successfully using just social media, but you need to use the right techniques. We have that workshop. It's extremely cheap for the information it provides. And I can guarantee you, if you follow what's in that workshop, you will see very, very different results very, very fast. The great thing about social media is you can turn your entire plan around today and you can start seeing results from tomorrow. So please, if you've got a social media plan right now that you're frustrated with, that you're not seeing results with, please do that workshop. Find out what you've been doing wrong. Find out what you need to be doing to get it right. And you'll see the differences. And I absolutely guarantee it. If you follow everything in that workshop and you don't get better results, I'll give you your money back. That's how important and effective social media plan is compared to just social media. Okay, again, I can't emphasize that enough. And I'm sorry if that's been a little bit too honest for you out there, but that's the truth of it. So now I'm going to ask you again, what's the point of difference with your brand? And I hope you've got some ideas. We also have a certificate in cosmetic market research and product positioning. So if you're sitting there a little stumped going, if I'm not saying it's organic and natural and that it doesn't contain pegs and parabens and sulfates, I'm really not sure what's so different about it. It's got some essential oils and some extracts. If you're sitting there like that, please do, again, just do the study-only version. These are not expensive for your brand. And our pricing is in Australian dollars. So if you're in US or if you're using Euro or Great British Pounds, then it's so much cheaper for you guys. The point is, if you're sitting there a little stumped at what your point of difference is once we remove those items I told you to cross out, then please do that to help your brand. It's going to make such a phenomenal difference. And again, if you're sitting there going, oh, my social media is just not happening, again, learn the difference between social media and effective, yay, look at me type social media. It will make a massive difference for your brand. So now let's open up to some questions. How feasible is it for small brands to undercut big brands, use low prices, point of difference? Let's talk about this one. How are you managing to sell a quality product at a lower price if it's comparable to a big brand? The only way that you could have a product cheaper than a big brand is to have less performance in it. Because costs like marketing need to go into every product. Costs of goods need to go into every product. And those big brands are getting better economies of scale for that product than you will ever get. So how effective? It's not effective. And then the other thing is, if you're only selling on price, you are totally a Me Too product. And why is a consumer going to purchase your product that they don't know your name versus a company where they do know the product name. The trust is here. So if you're suddenly cheaper, they are going to look at it and go, oh, they say they've got the same things in it, but I know this one, I'm going to trust this one. Even if it's a little bit more, I'm trusting it. So no, it's not effective to have a lower cost product than a big brand if that's your only strategy. Have a point of difference. We definitely do recommend when you're a small brand that you would be slightly cheaper than your competitors, but not a massive undercut. Otherwise, you're aiming for a different target market and you could be missing that competitor's target market, and in any case the perception of value gets lost, and again you'll get your consumer trusting the more expensive product from the known brand than your cheaper product, even if your stories appear to be the same. So not an effective strategy in most cases. How feasible is it for small brands? Oh, same question again. Okay, well, we don't have any other questions on branding. I've either given you a bit of a shock and a wake-up call this morning, or I've resonated with what you already knew. If you do have extra questions, please post them now. Otherwise, I did have a couple more stability questions I can now answer. Do we send Anhydrous product for PET? No, because there's no preservative in it. You don't need a preservative in pretty much all of your Anhydrous products. There'd be very rare exceptions. So PET is not relevant, so you don't need to do that. Here we've had another brand question. There is information on the internet about the negative sides of fragrance, which leads to fragrance-free branding. Is this the myth or the fact? It's another bad myth. What are they saying? Fragrances are really highly regulated, like massively highly regulated. So again, it would be just another bad marketing. The thing that actually about fragrance, though, just to clarify, there are some people, they do contain allergens, just like essential oils contain allergens. Essential oils actually contain a lot of allergens. If you're using essential oils or organic essential oils even, you've probably got allergens in your product that you weren't aware of. So you'll get some people that are very allergic to substances that will specifically look for fragrance-free. So that's where fragrance-free is a good thing. But is fragrance-free a good thing in general? Well, it depends who your target market is. If you're marketing to very sensitive skin individuals, they might be looking for that sort of thing. But no, in general, fragrances, there's nothing wrong with fragrances unless someone has a specific problem with that fragrance. In fact, fragrance can be a very important draw card for a lot of consumers. One of the first things people will do when they're looking at a new product is they'll smell it. That's one of the first things they do. The next thing is they'll usually put a little bit on their skin. We can't do that nowadays, of course, but that's the normal consumer response. So fragrances are perfectly safe unless a person has a specific allergy, but then they'd also have those allergies or issues with essential oils. So in those cases, it's very relevant. Social media just purchased, ready to get the ship started. Right, excellent. Whoever did that, you are not going to be disappointed. Like I say, I absolutely guarantee that if you don't get some value out of that program, I'll give you your money back. That's how sure I am that there will be so many things in that social media workshop that will get your brand right and turn it around and really make a difference, that I am definitely putting a money back guarantee on that for you. What is the difference between a Viscometer and a Rheometer? They're basically the same thing. What's a rose called by two different names? Basically, they're checking the rheology. That's what you're checking for. You're checking for the rheology or viscosity of the product. And they would usually have measurements in CPS, centipoise. And if that's the case, then I would say that they're the same kind of machine, just a different name. We do have another stability question here. When doing the different stabilizing tests, can we put the same sample for freeze-thaw then in the incubator? No, you cannot. You do need different product unopened for each time point and each test. You would get your, so for instance, your freeze-thaw, you would still run your pH, your viscosity, your appearance tests on that. You would still do all of those tests as well with your incubator samples, but you can't do the same. Like you can't use them because otherwise you're accelerating under one condition and you're accelerating under another. We just don't do it that way. So yes, you do need multiple jars or bottles of product. Again, use the packaging that you're going to be selling the product in so you can check for any packaging issues. But that's also what your lab batch is usually good for. You usually get enough product out of your lab batch to start your accelerated testing straight away. Okay, from your experience, can polymeric emulsifiers, cold processable only, stabilize an emulsion with around 15% oils? Any suggestions for a good polymeric emulsifier? I have several YouTube videos on various polymeric emulsifiers, so please go to my YouTube channel, type in polymeric emulsifier. You'll get some natural options, you'll get some synthetic. The synthetic ones do tend to perform the best. The natural ones, we usually need to add something else to help stabilize. Can they stabilize 15% oil? It depends on exactly which material you use. Generally speaking, these materials are extremely good with 10% oil, for sure. I'm pretty, could I say that general blanket statement? Yeah, okay, you may be forcing me a little bit into an uncomfortable zone there, but 15%, some of them, yes. Not all. Please do some samples, check it out. But yes, some of them could definitely handle that. And again, please watch, do the search on my YouTube channel. I've got lots there to get you started. Are there any different rules for branding claims in United Arab Emirates as in the EU? Look, there is a bit of a state of flux in regulations over there. I definitely would recommend you follow EU, and a lot of them are based on that. That would be my recommendation. Also, just check exactly where you are, because look, they are forming their own. If you ask me personally, I wish the entire world would just follow one set of regulations, but it doesn't. The EU has some fantastic detailed guidance. So if I'm ever in doubt, I'll always look to the EU, but then you also need to consider your local region. You do need to make sure you check your local country and follow that specifically. If it differs to the EU in any way, you must focus on following your local region. So in Australia, it's also not illegal, misleading and deceptive to use free-from claims. It is technically illegal and misleading to use free-from claims, but these regulators have much bigger, well, right now, the entire world has a much bigger crisis on its hands, but these regulators generally have bigger issues of non-compliance to focus on. What I'm saying to you as a small brand is it's never a good idea to focus on what your product doesn't have. Please focus on what your product does do, okay? So even if the laws don't specifically state, like the guidelines, the EU guidelines are extremely clear. They could not be clearer if they tried. And technically, any country in the world could use those guidelines as an example of, let's define what's misleading and deceptive. And again, it comes down to how your consumer would perceive the message too. Are they scared to use a PEG or a paraben in a competitor product because you've made them feel that way? That's misleading and deceptive, because if those ingredients are being used within regulatory limits, they're safe, and you should not be suggesting otherwise. But the bigger message I really want you to take away from today is it's not a good brand strategy. It's not a good marketing strategy. Why do I want to use your product specifically if that's all you're saying about it? Because there's 100 other small brands out there that I'm also not that interested in, because they don't tell me anything about their products other than it's free from all this stuff. I'm going to go and choose one of these products over here that does tell me what it's going to do for me. That's the bigger message I want you to take away from here. Not about whether it's misleading or illegal. What is it doing for your brand? What benefit is it promising your consumer? Why would I want to use your product? Okay, that's what you want to think. And it's not because it's free from all that stuff, because there's another 20 odd products out there also trying to say the same thing. Why would I want to use your product? Again, please, if you've written those, free from, what else? What else would make me want to use your product? Because the free from, even if you're in a country where it's not as tightly regulated as the EU UK, I'm still not understanding why I want to use your product. You need to give me something more than that. And I'm not talking me here, I'm talking about your target market. Why? Why do I want to use your product? And they're not good enough reasons to win a consumer. It's really, really hard to change a consumer's purchasing behaviors. So giving them what's not in it is not giving them a really solid why. So please remember that. That's the bigger message I really want you to take away from today. Do you consider 50 degrees a relevant stress test? This is 50 degrees Celsius for those working in Fahrenheit. A relevant stress test, and should it be a pass-fail criteria? Actually, 50 degrees is good for emulsion stability over 1 month only, but you can and often will get changes in that product that may never happen at real time. So, if a product passes 50 degrees, emulsion stability, pH, viscosity, all these other things, I'd say you've got a pretty stable product. If it fails 50 degrees, I'd look at what other parameters and what other changes are happening, because it may be a false result. So just bear that in mind. But if it passes, yay, that's pretty stable. How would you explain to common folk as to why the EU is often regarded as the standard for cosmetics? Their guidelines are so detailed, and they've got their COSing database, which has full INCI CAS references. It's got their annexes are so clearly set out. I mean, you go to some other regulations and that kind of information is just not so easy to find. They have, they have pages and pages of rules, and while that can seem you know, a little annoying when you're first trying to learn it. The point is, it's so clear and it's so accessible, and it just makes good sense. They also have their scientific committee that review a lot of these so-called, you know, materials that are, you know, safety. Parabens is a perfect example. They have done so many exhaustive studies to definitively prove and set safety limits so that consumers don't have to be scared of their products. And if you don't believe me, go read their documentation. They've done it. We've got a big round table of scientists. And if you're sitting there and you think you know better than a round table of these scientists on whose opinion the government is basing their decisions, well, do I need to say it? So they've got so much great technical information that's so scientifically robust. And if there is ever a concern, they reevaluate it. They've reevaluated the status of parabens several times. Every time a new bit of research comes out, they reevaluate it again. This is how on the ball they are with their regulations. They're so clearly defined, so well set out. That's why I'm a big fan of them. We have run out of time today. I hope you got a lot out of today. Sorry about ripping the Band-Aid off, but I really hope it's helped you, and I really hope you can see some benefits that I'm really trying to get across to you there. End of the day, it's your brand, it's your decision, but I'm just trying to give you the tools and the knowledge to make the best decisions for your brand. Thank you again for joining me. We are going to be running some more lives, so please stay tuned. Let us know what you'd like to hear about, because I am here to give you what you want to hear. So over to you now. Happy formulating.